The Battle of Little Bighorn, a comprehensive analysis. The Battle of Little Bighorn, often referred to as Custer's Last Stand, is one of the most iconic and studied military engagements in American history. Fought on June 25 to 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, the battle pitted the United States Army's 7th Cavalry Regiment, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, against a coalition of Native American tribes, primarily the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho. The battle resulted in a decisive victory for the Native American forces and a catastrophic defeat for the 7th Cavalry, with Custer and all his immediate command killed. This article delves into the intricate details of the battle, exploring its causes, key figures, strategies, and aftermath, while also examining its broader implications for American history and the Native American experience. Historical context. The expansion of the United States. The mid-19th century was a period of rapid expansion for the United States. The doctrine of manifest destiny, the belief that the U.S. was destined to expand across the North American continent, fueled westward migration and the displacement of Native American tribes. The discovery of gold in the Black Hills in 1874 further intensified the pressure on native lands, as prospectors and settlers flooded into the region. The Great Sioux War of 1876. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a pivotal event in the Great Sioux War of 1876, a series of conflicts between the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. The war was sparked by the U.S. government's attempts to force the tribes onto reservations and its violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, which had guaranteed the Black Hills to the Lakota. The role of George Armstrong Custer. George Armstrong Custer was a flamboyant and controversial figure in the U.S. Army. A veteran of the Civil War, Custer was known for his aggressive tactics and his desire for glory. His involvement in the Black Hills Expedition of 1874, which confirmed the presence of gold, made him a key figure in the government's efforts to subdue the Lakota and their allies. Prelude to the battle. The gathering of tribes. In the spring of 1876, thousands of Native Americans, led by leaders such as Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall, gathered in the Little Bighorn Valley. This encampment was one of the largest gatherings of Native Americans in history, with estimates of the population ranging from 6,000 to 10,000 people, including 1,500 to 2,000 warriors. The U.S. Army's strategy. The U.S. Army planned a three-pronged campaign to converge on the Native American encampment. Brigadier General George Crook would advance from the south, Colonel John Gibbon from the west, and Brigadier General Alfred Terry, with Custer's 7th Cavalry, from the east. The goal was to trap the native forces and force them onto reservations. Custer's march to the Little Bighorn. Custer's 7th Cavalry set out from Fort Abraham Lincoln in May 1876. On June 22, Custer was ordered to scout ahead of Terry's main force. Despite being instructed to wait for reinforcements, Custer decided to attack the native encampment on his own, believing that his regiment could handle the situation. The Battle of Little Bighorn. June 25, 1876. The initial engagement. On the morning of June 25, Custer scouts reported a large Native American encampment along the Little Bighorn River. Custer divided his regiment into 3 battalions, one led by Major Marcus Reno, one by Captain Frederick Benteen, and one by himself. Reno was ordered to attack the southern end of the encampment, while Custer planned to strike from the north. Reno's attack was quickly repulsed, and his battalion retreated to a defensive position on a nearby hill. Benteen's battalion, which had been sent to scout the area, joined Reno, and together they withstood several native assaults. Custer's Last Stand. Custer's battalion, consisting of about 210 men, advanced towards the northern end of the encampment. However, they were met by a massive force of native warriors, led by Crazy Horse and Gall. Custer's men were quickly overwhelmed, and within hours, Custer and all his immediate command were killed. The exact details of Custer's last stand remain a subject of debate, but it is clear that the native forces outnumbered and outmaneuvered the 7th Cavalry. June 26, 1876. The siege of Reno and Benteen. Throughout the night of June 25 and into the next day, Reno and Benteen's battalions were besieged by native warriors. Despite being outnumbered, they managed to hold their position until reinforcements arrived on June 27. The native forces, having achieved a significant victory, began to disperse, knowing that the U.S. Army would soon launch a counteroffensive. Key figures George Armstrong Custer's role in the Battle of Little Bighorn has been the subject of extensive analysis and debate. His decision to divide his regiment and attack without waiting for reinforcements has been criticized as reckless. However, Custer's aggressive tactics had been successful in previous engagements, and he may have underestimated the size and strength of the native forces. Sitting Bull, a Hunkpapa Lakota holy man and leader, played a crucial role in uniting the various tribes against the U.S. Army. His vision of a great victory over the soldiers inspired the warriors and helped to coordinate their efforts during the battle. Crazy Horse, an Oglala Lakota war leader, was one of the most effective commanders on the battlefield. His tactical brilliance and fearless leadership were instrumental in the native victory. Crazy Horse's ability to rally his warriors and execute complex maneuvers under pressure was key to the success of the native forces. Major Marcus Reno and Captain Frederick Benteen. Reno and Benteen's actions during the battle have also been scrutinized. Reno's initial attack was poorly executed, and his subsequent retreat has been criticized as cowardly. However, Reno and Benteen's ability to hold their position and protect their men under intense pressure was commendable. Strategies and tactics. Native American warfare. The Native American forces employed traditional guerrilla tactics, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They relied on speed, mobility, and surprise to outmaneuver the U.S. Army. The warriors were highly skilled horsemen and marksmen, and they fought with a fierce determination to protect their families and way of life. U.S. Army tactics. The U.S. Army's tactics were based on conventional military doctrine, emphasizing discipline, firepower, and coordinated attacks. However, these tactics were ill-suited to the terrain and the nature of the conflict. The soldiers were often out of their element, struggling to adapt to the fast-paced and fluid nature of Native American warfare. The role of intelligence. Both sides relied on intelligence to inform their strategies. Custer's scouts provided him with information about the size and location of the native encampment, but Custer may have underestimated the number of warriors. The native forces, on the other hand, were well aware of the U.S. Army's movements and were able to prepare for the attack. Aftermath of the battle. Immediate consequences. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a stunning victory for the Native American forces, but it also had significant consequences. The U.S. government, shocked by the defeat, intensified its efforts to subdue the tribes. The Great Sioux War continued, and within a year, the native forces were forced to surrender. The fate of the 7th Cavalry. The loss of Custer and his men was a devastating blow to the 7th Cavalry and the U.S. Army. The battle became a symbol of the dangers of underestimating the enemy and the challenges of fighting on the frontier. The 7th Cavalry was later involved in the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890, which marked the end of the Indian Wars. The impact on Native American tribes. The victory at Little Bighorn was a temporary triumph for the Native American tribes. The U.S. government's determination to control the West led to the eventual subjugation of the tribes and the loss of their traditional lands. The battle became a symbol of native resistance, but it also highlighted the overwhelming power of the U.S. military. Historical interpretations. The myth of Custer's last stand. The Battle of Little Bighorn has been romanticized and mythologized in American culture. Custer's last stand has been depicted as a heroic and tragic event, with Custer as a martyr for the cause of westward expansion. However, this narrative has been challenged by historians who emphasize the role of Native agency and the complexities of the conflict. Native perspectives. Native American accounts of the battle provide a different perspective, emphasizing the bravery and skill of the warriors and the importance of the victory for their people. These accounts challenge the traditional narrative and highlight the resilience and determination of the native forces. Archaeological and historical research. Recent archaeological and historical research has shed new light on the battle. Excavations at the battlefield have uncovered artifacts and evidence that provide insights into the tactics and experiences of both sides. This research has helped to refine our understanding of the battle and its significance. The legacy of the Battle of Little Bighorn. Cultural impact. The Battle of Little Bighorn has had a lasting impact on American culture. It has been the subject of numerous books, films, and artworks, each offering a different interpretation of the events. The battle continues to be a symbol of the clash between Native American and Euro-American cultures. Military lessons. The battle has also been studied for its military lessons. It highlights the importance of intelligence, adaptability, and understanding the enemy. The U.S. Army's defeat at Little Bighorn led to changes in military tactics and strategy, particularly in the context of frontier warfare, commemoration and memorials. The battlefield is now a national monument, known as the Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument. It serves as a place of remembrance and reflection, honoring the soldiers and native warriors who fought and died there. The monument also seeks to provide a balanced and inclusive interpretation of the battle. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a pivotal event in American history, with far-reaching consequences for both the United States and the Native American tribes. It was a moment of triumph for the Native forces, but it also marked the beginning of the end of their resistance to U.S. expansion. The battle continues to be a subject of fascination and debate, offering valuable insights into the complexities of American history and the enduring legacy of the frontier. As we reflect on the Battle of Little Bighorn, we are reminded of the importance of understanding the past and the need to honor the diverse perspectives and experiences that shape our history. The Battle of Little Bighorn, a comprehensive analysis of its causes. The Battle of Little Bighorn, often referred to as Custer's Last Stand, is one of the most iconic and studied events in American history. Fought on June 25 to 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, the battle pitted the United States Army's 7th Cavalry Regiment, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, against a coalition of Native American tribes, primarily the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho. The battle resulted in a decisive victory for the Native American forces, with Custer and all his men killed. The causes of the Battle of Little Bighorn are complex and multifaceted, involving a combination of historical, political, social, and economic factors. This article will explore these causes in detail, providing a comprehensive understanding of the events that led to this pivotal moment in American history. Point 1. Historical context. The expansion of the United States. Manifest destiny and westward expansion. The concept of manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was destined to expand across the North American continent, played a significant role in shaping U.S. policy towards Native American tribes. As settlers moved westward in search of land, gold, and other resources, they increasingly encroached on Native American territories. This expansion was often accompanied by violent conflicts, as Native Americans resisted the loss of their lands and way of life. The Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears. The Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed into law by President Andrew Jackson, authorized the forced relocation of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States to territories west of the Mississippi River. This policy led to the Trail of Tears, a series of forced marches that resulted in the deaths of thousands of Native Americans. The Indian Removal Act set a precedent for the U.S. government's treatment of Native Americans and established a pattern of displacement and violence that would continue for decades. The California Gold Rush and the Oregon Trail. The California Gold Rush of 1849 and the subsequent influx of settlers along the Oregon Trail further exacerbated tensions between Native Americans and the U.S. government. As thousands of settlers moved westward, they disrupted Native American hunting grounds, destroyed natural resources, and introduced diseases that decimated Native American populations. The U.S. government, eager to facilitate westward expansion, often sided with settlers in disputes over land and resources, further marginalizing Native American tribes. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1851, and the reservation system. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1851, in an effort to reduce conflicts between Native American tribes and settlers, the U.S. government negotiated the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1851. The treaty established boundaries for the territories of various tribes, including the Lakota Sioux, and promised annuities in exchange for the tribe's agreement to allow settlers to pass through their lands. However, the treaty was often violated by both settlers and Native Americans, leading to continued tensions and conflicts. The reservation system. The U.S. government's policy of establishing reservations for Native American tribes was intended to isolate them from settlers and assimilate them into American society. However, the reservation system was deeply flawed. Reservations were often located on marginal lands unsuitable for agriculture or hunting, and the government frequently failed to provide the promised annuities and supplies. Many Native Americans resisted the reservation system, viewing it as a threat to their way of life and sovereignty. The Dakota War of 1862. The Dakota War of 1862, also known as the Sioux Uprising, was a conflict between the Dakota Sioux and the U.S. government in Minnesota. The war was sparked by broken treaties, delayed annuities, and the encroachment of settlers on Dakota lands. The conflict resulted in the deaths of hundreds of settlers and Dakota Sioux, and the subsequent execution of 38 Dakota men in the largest mass execution in U.S. history. The Dakota War further strained relations between the U.S. government and Native American tribes and set the stage for future conflicts. The Civil War and its aftermath. The impact of the Civil War on Native American relations. The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, had a profound impact on U.S. policy towards Native Americans. During the war, the U.S. government was preoccupied with the conflict between the North and the South, leading to a reduction in military presence in the West. This allowed Native American tribes to regain some of their autonomy and resist U.S. expansion more effectively. However, after the war, the U.S. government turned its attention back to the West, leading to increased conflicts with Native American tribes. The Homestead Act of 1862. The Homestead Act of 1862, passed during the Civil War, encouraged westward expansion by offering 160 acres of public land to settlers for a small fee, provided they improved the land by building a dwelling and cultivating crops. The act led to a surge in settlement in the West, further encroaching on Native American lands and exacerbating tensions between settlers and tribes. The Transcontinental Railroad. The construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, completed in 1869, was a major factor in the U.S. government's efforts to open up the West for settlement and economic development. The railroad facilitated the movement of people and goods across the country, but it also disrupted Native American hunting grounds and led to increased conflicts between tribes and settlers. The U.S. government often used military force to protect the railroad and its workers, further alienating Native American tribes. The Red Cloud's War and the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868. Red Cloud's War, 1866 to 1868. Red Cloud's War was a conflict between the Lakota Sioux, led by Chief Red Cloud, and the U.S. Army over control of the Powder River Country in present-day Wyoming and Montana. The war was sparked by the U.S. government's decision to build a series of forts along the Bozeman Trail, which cut through traditional Lakota hunting grounds. The Lakota, along with their allies the Cheyenne and Arapaho, successfully defended their territory and forced the U.S. Army to abandon the forts. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed in 1868, ended Red Cloud's War and established the Great Sioux Reservation, which included the Black Hills, a sacred area for the Lakota. The treaty also guaranteed the Lakota the right to hunt in the Powder River Country and required the U.S. government to obtain the consent of 3/4 of the adult male Lakota population before making any changes to the reservation boundaries. However, the treaty was soon violated by the U.S. government, leading to renewed tensions and conflicts. The Black Hills Gold Rush and the Great Sioux War. The Black Hills Gold Rush in 1874. An expedition led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer confirmed the presence of gold in the Black Hills, a sacred area for the Lakota Sioux. The discovery of gold led to a rush of prospectors and settlers into the Black Hills, in direct violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The U.S. government, eager to exploit the gold reserves, made little effort to prevent the influx of settlers, further alienating the Lakota and their allies. The Great Sioux War, 1876 to 1877. The Great Sioux War, also known as the Black Hills War, was a series of conflicts between the U.S. Army and the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. The war was sparked by the U.S. government's attempts to force the tribes onto reservations and its refusal to honor the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The war culminated in the Battle of Little Bighorn, where the Lakota and their allies achieved a significant victory over the U.S. Army. The role of George Armstrong Custer. Custer's military career. George Armstrong Custer was a prominent and controversial figure in the U.S. Army. He gained fame during the Civil War for his daring tactics and aggressive leadership. After the war, Custer was assigned to the 7th Cavalry Regiment and played a key role in the U.S. government's campaigns against Native American tribes in the West. Custer's aggressive and often reckless approach to warfare made him a polarizing figure, both within the military and among the American public. Custer's ambitions and ego played a significant role in the events leading up to the Battle of Little Bighorn. Custer was eager to regain the fame and glory he had achieved during the Civil War and saw the campaign against the Lakota and their allies as an opportunity to do so. Custer's desire for personal glory may have clouded his judgment and led him to underestimate the strength and determination of the Native American forces. Custer's tactical decisions at Little Bighorn. Custer's tactical decisions at the Battle of Little Bighorn have been the subject of much debate and analysis. Custer divided his forces into 3 battalions, a decision that has been criticized as a major tactical error. Custer's decision to attack the Native American encampment without waiting for reinforcements or conducting a proper reconnaissance has also been criticized. These decisions ultimately led to the annihilation of Custer's battalion and the deaths of all his men. The role of Native American leadership. Sitting Bull, a Hunkpapa Lakota holy man and leader, played a central role in the resistance against U.S. expansion. Sitting Bull was a charismatic and influential leader who united the Lakota and their allies in their fight to protect their lands and way of life. Sitting Bull's vision of a united Native American resistance was a key factor in the success of the Lakota and their allies at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Crazy Horse, an Oglala Lakota war leader, was one of the most skilled and respected warriors among the Lakota. Crazy Horse's tactical brilliance and fearless leadership were instrumental in the Native American victory at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Crazy Horse's ability to inspire and lead his warriors in battle was a key factor in the defeat of Custer's forces. Gall, a Hunkpapa Lakota war chief, was another important leader in the Native American resistance. Gall played a key role in the Battle of Little Bighorn, leading his warriors in fierce combat against Custer's forces. Gall's leadership and bravery were crucial to the Native American victory. The U.S. government's policy of assimilation. The Dawes Act and the allotment policy. The U.S. government's policy of assimilation, aimed at forcing Native Americans to adopt European American culture and abandon their traditional ways of life, was a major factor in the conflicts leading up to the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Dawes Act of 1887, also known as the General Allotment Act, sought to break up tribal lands and distribute them to individual Native Americans in an effort to encourage farming and assimilation. However, the policy led to the loss of millions of acres of Native American land and further marginalized Native American tribes. The boarding school system. The U.S. government's boarding school system, which sought to assimilate Native American children by removing them from their families and communities and forcing them to adopt European American culture, was another aspect of the assimilation policy. The boarding schools were often harsh and abusive, and many Native American children suffered physical, emotional, and cultural trauma as a result. The boarding school system further alienated Native American tribes and contributed to the resistance against U.S. expansion. The role of the media and public opinion. The media's portrayal of Native Americans. The media played a significant role in shaping public opinion about Native Americans and the conflicts in the West. Newspapers and magazines often portrayed Native Americans as savages and obstacles to progress, while glorifying the actions of the U.S. Army and settlers. This biased portrayal of Native Americans contributed to a lack of sympathy for their plight and justified the U.S. government's aggressive policies towards them. The impact of Custer's death on public opinion. The death of George Armstrong Custer and his men at the Battle of Little Bighorn had a profound impact on public opinion in the United States. Custer was widely regarded as a hero, and his death was seen as a tragic loss. The media's portrayal of the battle as a massacre of brave soldiers by savage Indians further inflamed public sentiment and led to calls for revenge against the Native American tribes. The aftermath of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The U.S. government's response. The U.S. government responded to the defeat at the Battle of Little Bighorn by increasing its military presence in the West and intensifying its efforts to force Native American tribes onto reservations. The government also sought to punish the Lakota and their allies for their victory, leading to further conflicts and the eventual surrender of many Native American leaders, including Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. The Wounded Knee Massacre. The Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890 marked the end of the Indian Wars and the final defeat of the Native American resistance. The massacre, in which U.S. Army troops killed hundreds of unarmed Lakota men, women, and children, was a tragic and brutal conclusion to the decades-long conflict between the U.S. government and Native American tribes. The legacy of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Battle of Little Bighorn remains a symbol of Native American resistance and the U.S. government's aggressive policies towards Native American tribes. The battle has been the subject of numerous books, films, and scholarly studies, and continues to be a source of controversy and debate. The legacy of the battle is a reminder of the complex and often tragic history of U.S. Native American relations. The Battle of Little Bighorn was the result of a complex interplay of historical, political, social, and economic factors. The expansion of the United States, driven by the ideology of manifest destiny, led to the displacement and marginalization of Native American tribes. The U.S. government's policies of assimilation and reservation, combined with the discovery of gold in the Black Hills, further exacerbated tensions and led to the Great Sioux War. The leadership of figures like Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall, as well as the tactical decisions of George Armstrong Custer, played crucial roles in the outcome of the battle. The media's portrayal of Native Americans and the public's reaction to Custer's death also influenced the events that followed. The Battle of Little Bighorn remains a pivotal moment in American history, symbolizing the struggle of Native American tribes to protect their lands, culture, and way of life in the face of U.S. expansion and aggression. The tactics of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. A comprehensive analysis of their contributions to the Native American victory at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, fought on June 25 to 26, 1876, stands as one of the most significant military engagements in the history of the American West. It was a pivotal moment in the Great Sioux War of 1876–77, where the combined forces of the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes achieved a remarkable victory over the 7th Cavalry Regiment of the United States Army, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer. The Native American victory at the Little Bighorn was not merely a result of numerical superiority or luck, it was the culmination of strategic brilliance, tactical ingenuity, and the leadership of two of the most renowned Native American warriors, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. This article delves into the tactics employed by Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, exploring how their leadership, strategic vision, and understanding of the battlefield contributed to the Native American victory. By examining their backgrounds, the cultural and military context of the time, and the specific tactics used during the battle, we can gain a deeper understanding of how these two leaders outmaneuvered one of the most formidable military forces of their time. The historical context. The Great Sioux War of 1876–77. The Great Sioux War was a series of conflicts between the United States and the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes over control of the Black Hills, a region sacred to the Native Americans and rich in gold deposits. The U.S. government's attempts to force the tribes onto reservations and its violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, led to widespread resistance among the Native American tribes. The role of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull emerged as the principal leaders of the resistance. Crazy Horse, a Oglala Lakota warrior, was known for his daring tactics and deep understanding of the terrain. Sitting Bull, a Hunkpapa Lakota holy man and leader, was revered for his spiritual guidance and strategic acumen. Together, they united the tribes in a common cause, rallying them to defend their land and way of life. The leadership of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Crazy Horse, the warrior tactician. Crazy Horse's leadership was characterized by his ability to inspire his warriors and his innovative use of guerrilla tactics. He understood the importance of mobility, surprise, and the effective use of terrain. His tactics were rooted in the traditional Lakota way of warfare, which emphasized individual bravery, flexibility, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances on the battlefield. Sitting Bull, the spiritual and strategic leader. Sitting Bull's leadership was more spiritual and strategic. He was a visionary who understood the broader implications of the conflict with the United States. His ability to unite disparate tribes under a common cause was crucial in building a coalition capable of resisting the U.S. military. Sitting Bull's strategic vision extended beyond the battlefield. He sought to preserve the cultural and spiritual integrity of his people. The tactics of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. The use of terrain. One of the key factors in the Native American victory was their effective use of the terrain. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull understood the importance of positioning their forces in a way that would maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. The rolling hills, dense vegetation, and the winding course of the Little Bighorn River provided natural cover and allowed the Native American warriors to move undetected. The element of surprise was a critical component of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull's tactics. They knew that the U.S. cavalry was accustomed to fighting in open terrain, where their superior firepower and discipline could be fully utilized. By luring Custer's forces into a confined and unfamiliar environment, they were able to disrupt the cavalry's formations and create chaos on the battlefield. The decentralized command structure. Unlike the hierarchical command structure of the U.S. military, the Native American forces operated under a decentralized system. This allowed for greater flexibility and adaptability on the battlefield. Warriors were free to make decisions based on the immediate situation, which enabled them to respond quickly to changing circumstances. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull's ability to trust their warriors and delegate authority was a key factor in their success. The use of feints and deception. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull employed feints and deception to confuse and disorient the U.S. forces. They used small groups of warriors to draw Custer's troops into ambushes, where they could be overwhelmed by larger numbers. These tactics were designed to exploit the overconfidence and impetuosity of Custer, who was known for his aggressive and sometimes reckless approach to warfare. The psychological warfare played a significant role in the Native American victory. The sight of thousands of warriors, painted and armed for battle, created a sense of fear and uncertainty among the U.S. troops. The war cries, the beating of drums, and the relentless attacks on all fronts contributed to the breakdown of morale within Custer's command. The Battle of the Little Bighorn. The initial engagement. The battle began when Custer's 7th Cavalry Regiment encountered a large encampment of Native American tribes along the Little Bighorn River. Custer, underestimating the size and strength of the Native American forces, divided his regiment into 3 battalions, intending to attack from multiple directions. This decision would prove to be a fatal mistake. The flanking maneuver. Crazy Horse led a daring flanking maneuver that caught Custer's forces off guard. By attacking from the rear and the flanks, Crazy Horse was able to isolate and overwhelm Custer's battalion. The decentralized command structure of the Native American forces allowed them to coordinate their attacks effectively, while Custer's troops were unable to maintain their formations in the face of the relentless assault. The final stand of Custer's battalion took place on a hilltop, where they were surrounded and outnumbered. The Native American warriors, led by Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, closed in from all sides, using their superior numbers and knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. The battle ended with the complete annihilation of Custer's command, marking a significant victory for the Native American tribes. The aftermath and legacy. The impact of the victory. The Native American victory at the Little Bighorn was a significant blow to the U.S. military and a source of inspiration for the tribes. It demonstrated that the Native Americans could successfully resist the encroachment of the United States and defend their land and way of life. However, the victory was short-lived, as the U.S. government intensified its efforts to subdue the tribes and force them onto reservations. The legacy of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull's leadership and tactics have left a lasting legacy. They are remembered as symbols of resistance and resilience, embodying the spirit of the Native American struggle for freedom and self-determination. Their ability to unite disparate tribes and outmaneuver a superior military force continues to inspire and inform discussions about leadership, strategy, and the importance of cultural and spiritual values in warfare. The tactics of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull were instrumental in the Native American victory at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Their understanding of the terrain, use of surprise, decentralized command structure, and psychological warfare allowed them to outmaneuver and overwhelm the U.S. forces. While the victory was a significant moment in the history of the American West, it also highlighted the broader struggle of the Native American tribes to preserve their land, culture, and way of life in the face of relentless expansion and colonization. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull's legacy endures as a testament to the power of strategic thinking, cultural resilience, and the indomitable spirit of resistance. Their contributions to the Native American victory at the Little Bighorn continue to be studied and celebrated, offering valuable lessons in leadership, strategy, and the enduring importance of standing up for one's beliefs and way of life. The significance of the Black Hills Treaty in the lead-up to the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Black Hills, or Pahasapa as they are known in the Lakota language, have long been a sacred and central part of the culture, spirituality, and identity of the Lakota Sioux and other Native American tribes. The region, located in present-day South Dakota, is not only rich in natural beauty but also holds immense historical significance, particularly in the context of the relationship between Native American tribes and the United States government. One of the most pivotal moments in this history was the signing of the Black Hills Treaty, also known as the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868. This treaty, and its subsequent violation, played a crucial role in the events leading up to the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, a defining moment in the struggle for Native American sovereignty and resistance against U.S. expansionism. This article will explore the significance of the Black Hills Treaty in the lead-up to the Battle of Little Bighorn, examining the historical context, the terms of the treaty, its violation by the U.S. government, and the resulting tensions that culminated in one of the most famous battles in American history. Through this exploration, we will gain a deeper understanding of the complex interplay between treaties, land rights, and the broader struggle for Native American autonomy in the face of relentless westward expansion. Historical context: the Black Hills and Native American sovereignty. The sacred Black Hills. For centuries, the Black Hills have been a place of profound spiritual significance for the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and other Plains tribes. The Lakota believe that the Black Hills are the center of the world, a place where the earth and sky meet, and where the spirits reside. The hills are home to numerous sacred sites, including Bear Butte, Matopaha, which is considered a place of vision quests and spiritual renewal. The Lakota creation story itself is deeply tied to the Black Hills, and the region is central to their cultural and religious practices. The Black Hills were not just a spiritual center but also a vital resource for the tribes. The region provided abundant game, timber, and water, making it a key area for sustenance and survival. The Lakota and other tribes had long defended their claim to the Black Hills, resisting encroachment from other tribes and, later, from European settlers and the U.S. government. U.S. Expansion and the Plains Wars. By the mid-19th century, the United States was rapidly expanding westward, driven by the ideology of manifest destiny, which held that the U.S. was destined to expand across the North American continent. This expansion brought the U.S. government into direct conflict with Native American tribes, who were determined to protect their lands and way of life. The Plains Wars, a series of conflicts between Native American tribes and the U.S. Army, were a direct result of this expansion. The U.S. government sought to open up the Great Plains for settlement, mining, and railroad construction, while the tribes fought to maintain their sovereignty and control over their traditional lands. The Black Hills, with their strategic location and resources, became a focal point of this struggle. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1851, before the Black Hills Treaty of 1868, there was the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1851, also known as the Horse Creek Treaty. This treaty was an attempt to establish peace between the U.S. government and the Plains tribes, including the Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and others. The treaty defined territorial boundaries for each tribe and promised annuities in exchange for safe passage for settlers along the Oregon Trail. However, the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1851, was fraught with problems from the start. Many tribes were not adequately represented at the negotiations, and the boundaries were often unclear or ignored by both settlers and tribes. Moreover, the U.S. government frequently failed to deliver the promised annuities, leading to resentment and conflict. The treaty ultimately did little to prevent the escalating violence between Native Americans and settlers, and by the 1860s, the Plains were engulfed in war. The Black Hills Treaty of 1868, a promise of peace. The context of the 1868 treaty. By the late 1860s, the U.S. government was eager to end the costly and bloody conflict with the Plains tribes. The Civil War had just ended, and the government was keen to focus on reconstruction and westward expansion. At the same time, the tribes were weary of war and sought to secure their lands and way of life. In this context, the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux, along with other tribes, entered into negotiations at Fort Laramie in Wyoming. The resulting treaty, signed on April 29, 1868, was intended to establish peace and define the boundaries of the Great Sioux Reservation, which included the Black Hills. Key provisions of the treaty. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, contained several key provisions that were designed to protect the rights and lands of the Lakota and other tribes. The Great Sioux Reservation. The treaty established the Great Sioux Reservation, which included the Black Hills and extended across present-day South Dakota, Wyoming, and Nebraska. The reservation was to be set aside exclusively for the use of the Lakota Sioux and other tribes' hunting rights. The treaty guaranteed the tribes the right to hunt in the Powder River Country, which was outside the boundaries of the reservation. This was crucial for the tribes, as hunting was a vital part of their subsistence and culture. Military withdrawal. The U.S. government agreed to withdraw its military forces from the Powder River Country and to abandon the Bozeman Trail, a route that had been a source of conflict between settlers and tribes. Annuities and supplies. The treaty promised annuities, including food, clothing, and other supplies, to the tribes in exchange for their agreement to cease hostilities and live peacefully on the reservation. Non-interference. The treaty stipulated that no unauthorized persons would be allowed to enter the reservation, and that the U.S. government would take measures to prevent such incursions. Amendment process. The treaty included a provision that any future changes to the treaty would require the consent of 3/4 of the adult male population of the tribes. The significance of the treaty. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, was significant for several reasons. First, it represented a formal recognition by the U.S. government of the sovereignty and land rights of the Lakota Sioux and other tribes. The treaty acknowledged the Black Hills as part of the Great Sioux Reservation and guaranteed the tribe's right to live and hunt in the region. Second, the treaty was a rare moment of negotiation and compromise between the U.S. government and Native American tribes. At a time when the U.S. was aggressively pursuing westward expansion, the treaty offered a glimmer of hope for peaceful coexistence and respect for Native American rights. However, the treaty's significance was also rooted in its fragility. The U.S. government's commitment to upholding the treaty was tenuous at best, and the promises made in the treaty would soon be broken, leading to renewed conflict and ultimately to the Battle of Little Bighorn. The violation of the treaty. The Black Hills Gold Rush. The discovery of gold in 1874, just 6 years after the signing of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer led an expedition into the Black Hills. Officially, the expedition was intended to explore the region and map its terrain. However, Custer and his men also had another objective: to search for gold. The discovery of gold in the Black Hills was a turning point in the history of the region. Custer's expedition reported finding gold in the hills, and news of the discovery spread rapidly. Soon, prospectors and miners began to flood into the Black Hills, despite the fact that the region was part of the Great Sioux Reservation and off-limits to non-Native Americans under the terms of the 1868 treaty. The U.S. government's response. The influx of miners into the Black Hills posed a direct challenge to the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The U.S. government was faced with a dilemma: enforce the treaty and remove the miners, or allow the gold rush to continue and risk violating the treaty. Initially, the government attempted to enforce the treaty. In 1875, President Ulysses S. Grant issued an order prohibiting unauthorized persons from entering the Black Hills. However, the order was largely ignored, and the government lacked the resources and will to enforce it effectively. As the gold rush continued, pressure mounted on the government to open the Black Hills to mining and settlement. The economic potential of the gold deposits was too great to ignore, and the government began to look for ways to extinguish the tribe's claim to the land. The attempt to purchase the Black Hills. In 1875, the U.S. government attempted to negotiate the purchase of the Black Hills from the Lakota Sioux. A commission was sent to the Great Sioux Reservation to offer $6 million for the land. However, the Lakota leaders, including Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, refused to sell. They viewed the Black Hills as sacred and non-negotiable, and they were determined to protect their land and way of life. The failure of the negotiations marked a turning point in the relationship between the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux. The government, unwilling to accept the tribe's refusal to sell, began to pursue a more aggressive policy aimed at forcing the tribes to relinquish their claim to the Black Hills. The violation of the treaty. The U.S. government's decision to allow the gold rush to continue and to attempt to purchase the Black Hills represented a clear violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The treaty had guaranteed the tribe's right to the Black Hills and had stipulated that any changes to the treaty would require the consent of 3/4 of the adult male population of the tribes. By ignoring these provisions, the government effectively nullified the treaty and set the stage for renewed conflict. The violation of the treaty had profound consequences for the Lakota Sioux and other tribes. It undermined their trust in the U.S. government and reinforced their determination to defend their land and sovereignty. The stage was set for a confrontation that would culminate in the Battle of Little Bighorn. The lead-up to the Battle of Little Bighorn, the growing tensions, the violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, and the influx of miners into the Black Hills led to growing tensions between the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux. The tribes were increasingly frustrated and angered by the government's failure to uphold the treaty and by the encroachment on their lands. In response to the growing tensions, many Lakota and Cheyenne leaders, including Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, began to advocate for resistance. They called for a united front against the U.S. government and urged their people to prepare for war. The Great Sioux War of 1876. The U.S. government launched a military campaign against the Lakota Sioux and their allies, known as the Great Sioux War. The campaign was aimed at forcing the tribes onto reservations and opening the Black Hills to settlement and mining. The U.S. Army, under the command of General Philip Sheridan, devised a strategy to attack the tribes from multiple directions. The plan called for 3 columns of troops to converge on the Powder River country, where it was believed that the tribes were gathering. One of these columns was led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, who was tasked with scouting the area and locating the tribes. Custer's column, consisting of the 7th Cavalry, set out from Fort Abraham Lincoln in present-day North Dakota in May 1876. The gathering of the tribes as the U.S. Army prepared for its campaign. The Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho were also preparing for battle. In the spring of 1876, thousands of Native Americans gathered in the Powder River country, forming one of the largest gatherings of tribes in history. The gathering was led by Sitting Bull, a respected spiritual leader and warrior, and Crazy Horse, a renowned war chief. The tribes were united in their determination to defend their land and way of life, and they were prepared to fight if necessary. The gathering was also a time of spiritual preparation. Sitting Bull conducted a sun dance, a sacred ceremony in which he had a vision of a great victory over the U.S. Army. The vision was interpreted as a sign that the tribes would be victorious in the coming battle. The Battle of Little Bighorn on June 25, 1876, Custer's 7th Cavalry encountered the gathered tribes near the Little Bighorn River in present-day Montana. Custer, underestimating the size and strength of the Native American forces, divided his troops and launched an attack. The battle that followed, known as the Battle of Little Bighorn or Custer's Last Stand, was a decisive victory for the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. Custer and all of his men were killed, and the U.S. Army suffered one of its most devastating defeats in the history of the Indian Wars. The victory at Little Bighorn was a moment of triumph for the tribes, but it was also a turning point in the Great Sioux War. The U.S. government, determined to avenge Custer's defeat, intensified its campaign against the tribes, leading to their eventual defeat and confinement to reservations. The aftermath and legacy of the Black Hills Treaty. The aftermath of the Battle of Little Bighorn was a significant moment in the history of the American West, but it did not mark the end of the struggle for Native American sovereignty. In the aftermath of the battle, the U.S. government redoubled its efforts to subdue the tribes and seize control of the Black Hills. In 1877, Congress passed the Black Hills Act, which unilaterally seized the Black Hills from the Lakota Sioux and opened the region to mining and settlement. The act was a clear violation of the Treaty of Fort Laramie and a betrayal of the promises made to the tribes. The Lakota Sioux and other tribes were forced onto reservations, and their way of life was fundamentally altered. The loss of the Black Hills was a profound blow to their culture and spirituality, and it remains a source of pain and controversy to this day. The legal battle for the Black Hills. In the 20th century, the Lakota Sioux began a legal battle to reclaim the Black Hills. In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in United States v. Sioux Nation of Indians that the seizure of the Black Hills was illegal and that the tribes were entitled to compensation. The court awarded the tribes $106 million, but the Lakota Sioux refused the money, insisting that the Black Hills were not for sale. The legal battle for the Black Hills continues to this day, with the tribes advocating for the return of their sacred land rather than financial compensation. The struggle for the Black Hills is a powerful reminder of the ongoing impact of the Treaty of Fort Laramie and the broader history of Native American dispossession. The legacy of the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, and its violation have left a lasting legacy on the history of the American West and the relationship between the U.S. government and Native American tribes. The treaty represents both a moment of hope and a profound betrayal, a promise of peace that was ultimately broken. The legacy of the treaty is also reflected in the broader history of Native American resistance and resilience. The Battle of Little Bighorn, while a moment of triumph, was also a reminder of the high cost of defending Native American sovereignty and land rights. Today, the Black Hills remain a symbol of the ongoing struggle for Native American rights and recognition. The tribe's fight to reclaim their sacred land is a testament to their enduring connection to the land and their determination to preserve their culture and way of life. The Black Hills Treaty of 1868 was a pivotal moment in the history of the American West, representing both a promise of peace and a profound betrayal. The treaty's violation by the U.S. government set the stage for the events leading up to the Battle of Little Bighorn, a defining moment in the struggle for Native American sovereignty and resistance against U.S. expansionism. The significance of the Black Hills Treaty lies not only in its historical context but also in its enduring legacy. The treaty and its violation are a powerful reminder of the complex and often tragic history of Native American-U.S. relations, and of the ongoing struggle for justice, recognition, and the return of sacred lands. As we reflect on the history of the Black Hills and the Treaty of Fort Laramie, we are reminded of the importance of honoring treaties, respecting Native American rights, and acknowledging the profound impact of historical injustices. The story of the Black Hills is not just a story of the past, it is a story that continues to shape the present and future of Native American tribes and the United States as a whole. The defeat at Little Bighorn and its impact on U.S. military strategy towards Native Americans. The Battle of Little Bighorn, often referred to as Custer's Last Stand, was a pivotal event in the history of the United States' interactions with Native American tribes. Fought on June 25 to 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, the battle saw the defeat of the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry Regiment, led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, by a combined force of Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. The Native American forces were led by several prominent leaders, including Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall. The defeat was a significant blow to the U.S. military and had far-reaching consequences for the nation's strategy towards Native Americans. This article will explore the impact of the defeat at Little Bighorn on the U.S. military's strategy towards Native Americans. It will examine the immediate aftermath of the battle, the changes in military tactics and policies, the broader implications for U.S. Native American relations, and the long-term consequences for both the U.S. military and Native American tribes. The Battle of Little Bighorn, a brief overview before delving into the impact of the defeat. It is essential to understand the context and events of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The battle was part of the Great Sioux War of 1876, a conflict between the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. The war was sparked by the U.S. government's desire to seize the Black Hills, a region sacred to the Lakota Sioux. Following the discovery of gold in the area, the U.S. Army launched a campaign to force the Native American tribes onto reservations and to secure the Black Hills. The campaign involved several military columns converging on the Native American encampments. Custer's 7th Cavalry was one of these columns, tasked with locating and engaging the Native American forces. Custer's decision to divide his regiment into smaller units and attack the Native American encampment without waiting for reinforcements proved disastrous. The Native American warriors, who significantly outnumbered Custer's forces, quickly surrounded and overwhelmed the 7th Cavalry. Custer and all the men under his direct command were killed in the battle, making it one of the most significant defeats in U.S. military history. Immediate aftermath of the defeat. The news of Custer's defeat at Little Bighorn shocked the nation. The U.S. public, accustomed to hearing of military victories against Native American tribes, was stunned by the scale of the loss. The defeat was a severe blow to the U.S. military's reputation and raised questions about the effectiveness of its strategies and tactics. In the immediate aftermath of the battle, the U.S. government and military faced several challenges: public outrage and demand for retribution. The public reaction to Custer's defeat was one of outrage and a demand for retribution. Custer, a flamboyant and controversial figure, was already a well-known personality, and his death only heightened the public's desire for vengeance. The U.S. government faced pressure to respond decisively to the defeat and to ensure that such a loss would not happen again. Military reassessment. The defeat forced the U.S. military to reassess its strategies and tactics. The loss of an entire regiment, including a prominent officer like Custer, highlighted the need for a more coordinated and cautious approach to dealing with Native American tribes. The military had to consider the strengths and capabilities of the Native American warriors, who had demonstrated their ability to outmaneuver and outfight the U.S. forces. Political implications. The defeat at Little Bighorn had significant political implications. The U.S. government was in the midst of implementing its policy of forced assimilation and relocation of Native American tribes onto reservations. The defeat raised questions about the feasibility of this policy and the ability of the U.S. military to enforce it. The government had to consider whether it needed to adopt a more aggressive or conciliatory approach to achieve its objectives. Changes in military strategy and tactics. The defeat at Little Bighorn led to several changes in the U.S. military's strategy and tactics towards Native American tribes. These changes were aimed at preventing future defeats and ensuring the success of the U.S. government's policies. Increased military presence and reinforcement. One of the immediate responses to the defeat was the reinforcement of military units in the region. The U.S. government sent additional troops and resources to the area to ensure that the Native American tribes could not capitalize on their victory. The military presence in the region was significantly increased, with more forts and outposts established to monitor and control Native American movements. The reinforcement of military units also involved the deployment of more experienced and better trained troops. The U.S. military recognized that the Native American warriors were skilled and resourceful fighters, and it needed to match their capabilities with well-trained and disciplined soldiers. Adoption of a more cautious and coordinated approach. The defeat at Little Bighorn highlighted the dangers of underestimating the Native American forces and the risks of dividing military units in hostile territory. In response, the U.S. military adopted a more cautious and coordinated approach to its operations. Military commanders were instructed to avoid engaging Native American forces without adequate intelligence and support. The emphasis was on gathering information about the enemy's strength, location, and intentions before launching any offensive operations. The military also placed greater importance on coordination between different units and columns to ensure that they could support each other in case of an engagement. Use of scouting and intelligence. The U.S. military recognized the importance of scouting and intelligence in its operations against Native American tribes. The Native American warriors were highly mobile and adept at using the terrain to their advantage, making it difficult for the U.S. forces to locate and engage them. In response, the military increased its reliance on scouts, both Native American and non-Native American, to gather information about the enemy's movements and intentions. The use of scouts allowed the military to track the Native American forces more effectively and to plan its operations accordingly. Targeting Native American resources and livelihoods. Another significant change in the U.S. military's strategy was the targeting of Native American resources and livelihoods. The military recognized that the Native American tribes relied on the buffalo herds for their sustenance and way of life. By targeting the buffalo herds, the military aimed to deprive the tribes of their primary source of food and supplies, forcing them to surrender or relocate to reservations. The U.S. government supported this strategy by encouraging the mass slaughter of buffalo herds by hunters and settlers. The decimation of the buffalo herds had a devastating impact on the Native American tribes, who were already facing pressure from the loss of their lands and the encroachment of settlers. Implementation of the total war strategy. The defeat at Little Bighorn led to the adoption of a total war strategy by the U.S. military. This strategy involved not only targeting the Native American warriors but also their families, villages, and resources. The aim was to break the will of the Native American tribes to resist and to force them to accept the U.S. government's terms. The total war strategy included the destruction of Native American villages, the capture of women and children, and the confiscation of horses and other valuable resources. The military also sought to disrupt the tribe's social and political structures by targeting their leaders and spiritual figures. Increased use of technology and firepower. The U.S. military also increased its use of technology and firepower in its operations against Native American tribes. The introduction of new weapons, such as repeating rifles and Gatling guns, gave the U.S. forces a significant advantage in firepower over the Native American warriors, who were often armed with bows, arrows, and older firearms. The military also made greater use of telegraph lines and railroads to improve communication and logistics. The ability to quickly move troops and supplies across vast distances allowed the military to respond more effectively to Native American movements and to maintain pressure on the tribes. Broader implications for U.S. Native American relations. The defeat at Little Bighorn had broader implications for U.S. Native American relations beyond the immediate changes in military strategy. The battle and its aftermath influenced the U.S. government's policies towards Native Americans and shaped the course of Native American history. Acceleration of the reservation policy. The defeat at Little Bighorn accelerated the U.S. government's policy of forcing Native American tribes onto reservations. The government viewed the reservations as a way to control and assimilate the Native American population, reducing their ability to resist U.S. expansion and influence. The reservation policy involved the relocation of Native American tribes to designated areas, often far from their traditional lands. The tribes were expected to adopt a sedentary lifestyle, engage in agriculture, and abandon their traditional ways of life. The U.S. government provided limited resources and support to the reservations, leading to widespread poverty, disease, and social dislocation among the Native American population. Increased hostility and mistrust. The defeat at Little Bighorn increased hostility and mistrust between the U.S. government and Native American tribes. The U.S. government viewed the Native American victory as a challenge to its authority and a threat to its expansionist goals. In response, the government adopted a more aggressive and punitive approach towards the tribes, seeking to crush any resistance and assert its dominance. For the Native American tribes, the defeat at Little Bighorn was a moment of triumph and defiance against the U.S. government's encroachment on their lands and way of life. However, the victory was short-lived, as the U.S. military's subsequent campaigns and policies led to the eventual subjugation of the tribes. The defeat also deepened the divisions within the Native American communities, as some leaders advocated for resistance while others sought accommodation with the U.S. government. Impact on Native American leadership. The defeat at Little Bighorn had a significant impact on Native American leadership. The battle elevated the status of leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, who became symbols of Native American resistance and defiance. However, the U.S. government viewed these leaders as threats to its authority and sought to neutralize their influence. In the years following the battle, the U.S. military and government targeted Native American leaders, either through military action or through diplomatic means. Sitting Bull, for example, was pursued by the U.S. military and eventually surrendered in 1881. Crazy Horse was killed in 1877 while in U.S. custody. The loss of these leaders weakened the Native American resistance and made it more difficult for the tribes to organize and coordinate their efforts against the U.S. government. Cultural and psychological impact. The defeat at Little Bighorn had a profound cultural and psychological impact on both the U.S. military and the Native American tribes. For the U.S. military, the defeat was a humiliating and sobering experience that challenged its sense of invincibility and superiority. The loss of Custer and his men became a symbol of the dangers and uncertainties of military campaigns against Native American tribes. For the Native American tribes, the victory at Little Bighorn was a moment of pride and defiance, but it also came at a great cost. The battle and its aftermath led to increased military pressure, the loss of traditional lands, and the disruption of their way of life. The defeat also marked the beginning of the end of the Native American resistance, as the U.S. government's policies and military campaigns gradually eroded their ability to resist. Long-term consequences for the U.S. military and Native American tribes. The defeat at Little Bighorn had long-term consequences for both the U.S. military and Native American tribes. These consequences shaped the course of U.S. Native American relations and influenced the development of U.S. military strategy and policy. Evolution of U.S. military strategy. The defeat at Little Bighorn marked a turning point in the evolution of U.S. military strategy towards Native American tribes. The lessons learned from the battle influenced the development of new tactics and approaches that would be used in subsequent conflicts with Native American tribes and in other military campaigns. The emphasis on coordination, intelligence, and the use of technology and firepower became hallmarks of U.S. military strategy. The experience of fighting against highly mobile and resourceful Native American warriors also influenced the development of counterinsurgency tactics that would be used in later conflicts, such as the Philippine-American War and the Vietnam War. Impact on Native American sovereignty and autonomy. The defeat at Little Bighorn and the subsequent U.S. military campaigns had a devastating impact on Native American sovereignty and autonomy. The U.S. government's policies of forced relocation, assimilation, and the destruction of Native American resources and way of life led to the loss of traditional lands, cultural practices, and political independence. The reservation system, which was intended to control and assimilate the Native American population, became a tool of oppression and marginalization. The tribes were confined to small, often inhospitable areas, and were subjected to U.S. government control and oversight. The loss of sovereignty and autonomy had long-lasting effects on Native American communities, contributing to social, economic, and political challenges that persist to this day. Legacy of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The legacy of the Battle of Little Bighorn continues to be felt in both U.S. and Native American history. The battle has been the subject of numerous books, films, and works of art, and has become a symbol of both Native American resistance and U.S. military failure. For the U.S. military, the battle serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating the enemy and the importance of careful planning and coordination. For Native American tribes, the battle is a reminder of their resilience and determination in the face of overwhelming odds, as well as the tragic consequences of U.S. expansion and colonization. Reconciliation and commemoration. In recent years, there have been efforts to reconcile and commemorate the events of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The battlefield has been preserved as a national monument, and there have been efforts to include Native American perspectives and voices in the interpretation and commemoration of the battle. These efforts reflect a growing recognition of the complex and often painful history of U.S. Native American relations. They also highlight the importance of understanding and acknowledging the impact of historical events on contemporary issues and challenges faced by Native American communities. The defeat at Little Bighorn was a pivotal event in the history of U.S. Native American relations. The battle and its aftermath had a profound impact on the U.S. military's strategy and tactics, leading to significant changes in how the military approached conflicts with Native American tribes. The defeat also had broader implications for U.S. government policies, Native American sovereignty, and the cultural and psychological legacy of the battle. The lessons learned from the defeat at Little Bighorn continue to resonate in U.S. military strategy and in the ongoing efforts to understand and address the complex history of U.S. Native American relations. The battle serves as a reminder of the challenges and consequences of military conflict, the importance of cultural understanding and respect, and the need for reconciliation and commemoration in the face of historical injustices. As we reflect on the impact of the defeat at Little Bighorn, it is essential to recognize the resilience and determination of the Native American tribes who fought to defend their lands and way of life. Their legacy continues to inspire and challenge us to strive for a more just and equitable future for all. The long-term effects of the Battle of Little Bighorn on the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. The Battle of Little Bighorn, often referred to as Custer's Last Stand, is one of the most iconic events in American history. Fought on June 25 to 26, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, the battle was a significant victory for the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes, who were led by notable leaders such as Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gall. The battle resulted in the annihilation of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and his 7th Cavalry Regiment. While the immediate aftermath of the battle was a moment of triumph for the Native American tribes, the long-term consequences were devastating. This article explores the enduring impacts of the Battle of Little Bighorn on the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes, focusing on their cultural, social, political, and economic landscapes over the subsequent decades. Historical context. The Plains Indian Wars. The Battle of Little Bighorn did not occur in isolation but was part of a broader conflict known as the Plains Indian Wars. These wars were a series of conflicts between Native American tribes and the United States government, primarily over land and resources. The discovery of gold in the Black Hills in the mid-1870s exacerbated tensions, as the U.S. government sought to acquire the land, which was sacred to the Lakota Sioux. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed in 1868, was intended to bring peace between the U.S. government and the Lakota Sioux. The treaty established the Great Sioux Reservation, which included the Black Hills, and guaranteed the Lakota exclusive use of this land. However, the discovery of gold led to an influx of miners and settlers, violating the treaty and prompting the U.S. government to attempt to purchase the Black Hills. When the Lakota refused, the government declared war. The Battle of Little Bighorn. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a direct result of these tensions. The U.S. Army, under the command of General Alfred Terry, launched a campaign to force the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho onto reservations. Custer's 7th Cavalry was part of this campaign, and his defeat at the hands of the Native American forces was a significant blow to the U.S. military. Immediate aftermath. U.S. government response. The defeat at Little Bighorn shocked the American public and led to a swift and brutal response from the U.S. government. The military increased its efforts to subdue the Plains tribes, and the government implemented policies aimed at assimilating Native Americans into mainstream American society. The victory at Little Bighorn, while a moment of pride for the tribes, ultimately accelerated their subjugation. Division among the tribes. The victory at Little Bighorn also led to divisions among the tribes. Some leaders, like Sitting Bull, advocated for continued resistance, while others, recognizing the overwhelming power of the U.S. military, sought peace. These divisions weakened the tribes' ability to present a united front against the U.S. government. Long-term effects on the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. Cultural impact. Loss of traditional ways of life. One of the most profound long-term effects of the Battle of Little Bighorn was the loss of traditional ways of life for the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. The U.S. government's policies of assimilation and forced relocation disrupted the tribe's social structures, spiritual practices, and economic systems. Relocation to reservations. Following the battle, the U.S. government intensified its efforts to relocate Native Americans to reservations. These reservations were often located on marginal land, unsuitable for agriculture or hunting, which had been the foundation of the tribe's economies. Suppression of cultural practices. The government also sought to suppress Native American cultural practices, including religious ceremonies, language, and traditional governance structures. The sun dance, a central spiritual practice for the Lakota, was banned, and children were sent to boarding schools where they were forced to adopt European American customs and abandon their native languages. Resilience and cultural revival. Despite these efforts, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes have demonstrated remarkable resilience. In recent decades, there has been a revival of traditional cultural practices, including the sun dance, language revitalization programs, and the re-establishment of traditional governance structures. Language revitalization. Efforts to preserve and revitalize native languages have been particularly important. Language is a key component of cultural identity, and many tribes have established language immersion programs to ensure that future generations can speak their native languages. Cultural education. Cultural education programs have also been established to teach tribal history, traditions, and values to younger generations. These programs help to reinforce a sense of identity and pride in tribal heritage. Social impact. Displacement and loss of community. The forced relocation to reservations had a devastating impact on the social fabric of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. Families were often separated, and traditional community structures were disrupted. Loss of land. The loss of land was particularly traumatic. The Black Hills, known as Pahasapa to the Lakota, are considered sacred, and their loss was a profound spiritual and cultural blow. Health and well-being. The conditions on reservations were often harsh, with limited access to healthcare, education, and economic opportunities. This led to high rates of poverty, disease, and mortality among Native American populations. Intergenerational trauma. The trauma of displacement, cultural suppression, and violence has had lasting effects on the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. Intergenerational trauma refers to the transmission of trauma from one generation to the next, and it has had a significant impact on the mental health and well-being of tribal members. Substance abuse. High rates of substance abuse, including alcoholism and drug addiction, are a direct result of intergenerational trauma. These issues are compounded by the lack of access to mental health services on many reservations. Suicide rates. Native American communities have some of the highest suicide rates in the United States. The loss of cultural identity, combined with the ongoing effects of historical trauma, contributes to this crisis. Political impact: loss of sovereignty. The Battle of Little Bighorn marked the beginning of the end of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes' sovereignty. The U.S. government's policies of assimilation and forced relocation were aimed at eradicating tribal governance structures and integrating Native Americans into mainstream American society. Allotment and assimilation. The Dawes Act of 1887, also known as the General Allotment Act, sought to break up tribal lands and distribute them to individual Native Americans. This policy was intended to encourage assimilation by promoting private land ownership and agriculture. However, it resulted in the loss of millions of acres of tribal land and further eroded tribal sovereignty. Indian Reorganization Act. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, also known as the Wheeler-Howard Act, marked a shift in U.S. policy towards Native Americans. The act sought to reverse some of the damage caused by the Dawes Act by promoting tribal self-government and economic development. However, it also imposed a Euro-American model of governance on tribes, which was often at odds with traditional practices. Modern tribal governance. Despite these challenges, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes have worked to reclaim their sovereignty and establish modern tribal governance structures. Tribal councils. Many tribes have established tribal councils, which serve as the governing bodies for their communities. These councils are responsible for making decisions on issues such as education, healthcare, and economic development. Legal battles. Tribes have also engaged in legal battles to reclaim land and assert their rights. The ongoing legal dispute over the Black Hills is a prime example. The Lakota Sioux have refused to accept a monetary settlement for the land, insisting on its return. Economic impact. Loss of economic base. The loss of land and traditional ways of life had a devastating impact on the economic base of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. The tribes' economies, which had been based on hunting, gathering, and trade, were effectively destroyed. Poverty. The forced relocation to reservations and the loss of land led to widespread poverty among Native American communities. Many reservations are located in remote areas with limited economic opportunities, and unemployment rates are often high. Dependence on government assistance. The loss of economic self-sufficiency has led to a dependence on government assistance. Many Native American communities rely on federal programs for healthcare, education, and housing. Economic development efforts. In recent decades, there have been efforts to promote economic development on reservations and reduce dependence on government assistance. Casinos and gaming. One of the most significant economic developments has been the establishment of casinos and gaming operations on reservations. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act of 1988 allowed tribes to operate casinos, which have become a major source of revenue for many communities. Entrepreneurship. There has also been a growing emphasis on entrepreneurship and small business development. Many tribes have established business incubators and loan programs to support Native American entrepreneurs. Sustainable development. Some tribes have focused on sustainable development, including renewable energy projects and ecotourism. These initiatives not only provide economic opportunities but also align with traditional values of environmental stewardship. The Battle of Little Bighorn was a pivotal moment in the history of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. While it was a moment of triumph, it also marked the beginning of a long and difficult period of subjugation, displacement, and cultural suppression. The long-term effects of the battle have been profound, impacting every aspect of tribal life, from culture and social structures to politics and economics. Despite these challenges, the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes have demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination to preserve their cultural heritage and reclaim their sovereignty. Efforts to revitalize traditional practices, promote economic development, and assert tribal rights are ongoing, and they offer hope for a brighter future. The story of the Battle of Little Bighorn and its aftermath is a testament to the strength and resilience of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people. It is a reminder of the enduring impact of historical events and the importance of understanding and addressing the legacy of the past. As we reflect on this history, we must also recognize the ongoing struggles faced by Native American communities and support their efforts to build a future that honors their heritage and ensures their well-being.